Good morning, everyone. We are in Acts chapter 21 this morning. Acts chapter 21, there's material out in the foyer, 4 pages if you would like to use that. But mainly the text we're going to use is our Bible. Acts chapter 21. We actually got through all of our material last week through chapter 21, verse 16, and so we're going to try and finish the chapter this morning. I want you to notice the very last verse of chapter 21. The typical punctuation at the end of a chapter that you're going to see in your Bible is a period or a question mark. This one's a colon. I think it's the only one in Scripture. It's one of those awkward chapter divisions. And there it is. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. I'll also mention this to you as we get ready to read and study Acts 21. We are introduced to a new character in verse 31. We'll see him again in the next couple of chapters, but he is, in my version, he's called the Tribune. There in verse 31 of chapter 21, somebody have a different translation for the Tribune? Okay, commander. We are all familiar with centurions. This guy is above a centurion. So the tribune, the commander, he is going to save Paul's life. Now, what we have seen typically in the book of Acts thus far is preaching in Jerusalem, and then in other places there's conflict where religious leaders or Jews in the city get really upset. A couple of times we've seen Greeks get upset and take Paul to the city officials. For the remainder of Acts, we're going to see Paul in courtrooms, standing before very official people, governors, even a king. It changed, really, after this section, or in this section. Everything here changes. And I hope we'll be able to observe that. Something else I will observe, and I dedicate the first page to this concept. I'm just not going to talk very long about it. But I noticed the Holy Spirit is not mentioned at all from this point on, except at the very end in the book. Why do you think that is? Okay, now you say God is taking control. It's not as if the Spirit said, hey, God, get out of the way, I'm going to do this. But God is working more through providence. That's what he's really working on right now, it seems. I just observed that. I thought it was interesting, and I think that's right. There's something that has changed because, hey, the Holy Spirit has been part and parcel the whole time. What did Jesus say to his apostles in chapter 1? Wait in Jerusalem for the promise, and then the outpouring is in chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. And from then on, we have the manifestation of the Spirit, communicating and talking and sending Philip here and sending Paul there and forbidding Paul from going somewhere. But then all of a sudden he disappears. It's not as if he's abandoned Paul. It's just different now. And it's really more about God's providence working through people, not the miraculous. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. It was in chapter 19, verse 21 that Paul said he is going to go to Jerusalem, and then after that he's going to go to Rome. That's what he said in Acts 19, 21 and 22. That starts the fourth major part of the book of Acts. Acts 19, 21 through chapter 28, verse 31. Does he go to Jerusalem? Well, yeah, he's here. Acts 21, verse 17. That's where we are. He's in Jerusalem. Does he go to Rome? Yeah. Acts 28, the last chapter, I think around verse 16. Did he go to Rome the way he thought he would? All right, so he will be arrested today. We'll see that there in verses 27 through 30. And from then on, for the rest of the book, Paul is under arrest. He cannot go here or there or yonder because he wants to, but because other people are making him go here or there. And we'll start looking at that. Okay, enough on all that. It says here, when we had come to Jerusalem. Acts 19:21, Acts 23, verse 11, Jesus said, you must go to Jerusalem, and so he does. And the brothers received us gladly. Who are the brothers? Well, the Christians in Jerusalem. They're happy to see Paul. So that's good. Was there a time when Paul might not have been received gladly by the Christians in Jerusalem? Yeah, in the beginning, he was a persecutor of Christians. Then they didn't trust him. But now years have passed since all of that, and here he is welcomed. It says then, on the following day, and I mention that detail because we are going to see a lot of references to days. There's going to be a count going on, and I will focus on that. I didn't put it in the material at all, but what we're going to be reading about it takes place on one day. So initially, there's several days that go by, and I'll point that out to you, and then we're going to have one big day when Paul is in Jerusalem and the tumult breaks out and he's arrested. So we'll think about that. But oh yeah, I will point this out to you then. If I can find it. Paul will say, it was just 12 days ago that I came here. And I'm probably looking right at it here in chapter 24, and I don't see it. Right smack in front of me. He says it's been 12 days. Yeah, there it is, verse 11. You can verify that it is no more than 12 days. So from what we're looking at today, his entrance into Jerusalem, to Acts 24 is 12 days. That's something to keep in mind. Luke is counting the days, and we'll talk more about that as we get to it. Oh, yeah. So on the following day that he arrived in Jerusalem, he goes to James. He goes to talk to James. Who is James? Is it James the Apostle, the brother of John? No, he died in Acts 12. So this James is the James from the Jerusalem Council. We understand that this is the half-brother of Jesus himself. They had the same mother, Mary. James, who had been an unbeliever during Jesus' ministry, is now a leader in the Jerusalem church. He's one of the elders there. And this is a large church. They probably had a lot of elders. And he's just one of them, but he's singled out here a little bit. And it says that all the elders were present. So it's not just James, although he is being singled out. And so after saying hi to them, hey, good to see you guys, Paul began to tell them all the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. So how long do you think that conversation took? Hey, let me tell you about everything that God's done since I was last here with you. The last time was Acts 15. What all happened in chapters 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20? I mean, you had Philippi, you had Thessalonica, Berea, Corinth, Ephesus. A lot's happened. And he's telling them about it. And notice what it's saying. What God had done among the Gentiles. He's not saying, let me tell you what God did among the Jews. Why would Paul want to focus on the great work being done by God among the Gentiles to Jewish church leaders in Jerusalem? Say that again.
Let them know that God is for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. To let them know that God is for everybody. Yes, sir.
Well, and for the most part, by this time, the Jews have been spoken to and tried to get right with God, and they basically rejected
Right.
that message. And there's still some that would convert.
Some did, but for the majority, they didn't. They just didn't. And that is an issue. The last time Paul was with these men was in Acts 15, and what were they arguing about? What was the Jerusalem Council about? Whether or not to force Gentiles to conform to Jewish customs, including circumcision. You can't be a Christian unless you circumcise yourself, your kids, your boys. And Paul is saying no, and we've been there and done that. So yeah, this is great. This is super. When when they heard it, they glorified God. So it's not that the Jewish Christians, it's not that the Jewish elders specifically are upset with the idea that Gentiles can become Christians. No bars held. They have full rights as disciples of Jesus as anyone else. So they're happy about that. Here's what they're not happy about. So what I want you to notice here in verses 20 through verse 22, they do a lot of talking. That's them talking. And it's going to continue through verse 24. So what we're about to read is the continuation, is the one-sided conversation of the Jerusalem elders. All right, Paul, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They are all zealous for the law, and they have been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them and pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what you have been told, and nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law. Okay, everybody got that? Let's move on to verse 25 then. Oh, yeah, maybe we should take a minute and look at this. There's a lot here, and these guys are rather verbose. They've thought this through. And when I read their response here, it makes me think they're a little nervous, especially when we start looking at the details. They say, first, let's talk about the Jews who have believed. We would just say the Christian Jews, the Jewish Christians. In just a moment, in verse 23, they're going to talk about the Gentiles who have believed. So they're concerned about both groups. This is what they say about the Jews who have believed. They are zealous for the law. Was Paul zealous for the law of Moses? Yeah, absolutely. They have been told about you. And this is what they've been told about you. You teach all the Jews who are living among the Gentiles, you've told them to forsake Moses, to not circumcise their children, to not walk according to our customs. So let's just pause there a moment, and you tell me if this accusation, if these ideas that Jewish Christians have, rumors, are they true? They're not. But wait a minute, didn't Paul say at the Jerusalem Council that you don't have to be circumcised in order to be accepted with God?
You don't have to take that interim step.
Say that again?
You don't have to take that interim step.
Okay.
We're coming from nothing.
All right. And that's what the whole book of Galatians is about, where Jewish Christians were coming in saying, you have to become, in essence, Jews. So there's some truth to it. But it's not true. I mean, there's a slight element of truth, but it's been twisted. Paul is not telling his fellow countrymen, it's all right. In fact, you really shouldn't circumcise your boys on the 8th day of their lives. You should just stop observing the Passover and the other festivals. Just don't do that anymore. Now, did Paul believe as a Jew, a Christian, a disciple of Jesus under the new covenant, that he had to observe the Passover? Did he believe that he had to, that people had to circumcise their children?
As a Christian, no.
Right. But what did Paul say? To the Jew, I became as a Jew. To the Gentile, I became as, or to the Greek, I became as a Greek. What he's saying is, it's not wrong anymore. It's not part of the covenant that we are that we have with God. That was the old covenant. We're now part of the new covenant. Simplifying this a little bit, but that's what he's saying. But they are positive that's what Paul's teaching. And the Jerusalem elders know it's not true. And so they have come up with a plan. What are they doing here? They're placating, aren't they? Now, what could have been Paul's response? Well, I mean, they're not accusing him of wrongdoing. Could he have said something like this? No, that's not at all true. And in fact, I don't have to prove myself to you. You don't have any right to question me. I'm not going to do diddly squat. Could he have said something like that? But he didn't. They said, "What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. What are we going to do?" And they have a solution. Here's the solution. "Do therefore what we tell you." And maybe Paul's sitting there going, no, he's probably not. He's trying to, let's just see what happens. We have 4 men under a vow. And so why don't you pay their expenses and participate with them in this vow? They're going to have to shave their heads. And when you do this, when you emerge from the vow, it's a 7-day vow. When you emerge from it, then everyone will go, "Oh, well, I guess Paul, none of that is true about Paul." What do you think? Do you think that's going to solve the problem? They could have put billboards throughout Jerusalem that said, "Paul doesn't believe all this stuff." And I don't think it would have made any difference. In fact, in case you don't know this, it's possible this is a Nazirite vow. I wish it had just come right out and said it's a Nazirite vow. And Paul has already taken a vow back in chapter 18. It was just mentioned very briefly. He took a vow for himself and shaved his head. Do you remember that? We didn't go over it very, very much because I was kind of saving it for this. And in case you don't know this, they normally last 7 days, and then the shaved head. Jeremy Baugh has been taking a Nazirite vow now for several years, and that's actually the reason why he doesn't have any hair on his head, in case you didn't know that. No wine either, by the way. So, okay. That was part of the Nazirite vow. I don't know if this is a Nazirite vow or not, but they make a big deal out of this, like I'm making a big deal out of this. I mean, we're looking at 4 verses and making a big deal out of what they're saying to him. They will know then. There's nothing to this. There's nothing to the accusations that are swirling around. So it's going to work. It's going to be great. Oh yeah, they're still not done. Sorry, they're still not done.
It seems that along the line, Paul has taken the spiritual aspect of following Moses and turned into a cultural.
Okay.
And that's a real fine line to be threaded.
Okay. So if part of your culture, when people become missionaries, they go overseas, they go to Italy or somewhere in Africa, are they going to make them American Christians? Now, what's interesting is that's what actually happened. They wanted to turn all these native peoples into Americans and do Christianity like Americans. Do church services happen in other places in the world, just like they are done here? No. Do you like your air conditioning this morning? Do you like your pews? A lot of places don't have that. They do things very differently. And so Paul is a Jew culturally. He's not a Jew spiritually. Is that what you're saying? He's not anymore. He's not part of the old covenant. And these are tightly held traditions. So these guys have been talking since verse 20, and now they focus on the Gentiles who have believed, and they talk about that letter from Acts 15. Now, did that letter solve the problem, solve the rift between Jew and Gentile? Did it make it go away? No, it was a temporary fix as well. But what does Paul do in response? So they talk about the Christian Jews, then they talk about the Gentile Jews. And Paul took the men the next day. He purified himself along with them, went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification would be fulfilled. So it's got to be all official. You got to write it down and turn it in. And the offering presented for each one of them that Paul's going to pay for. It's all set up. That's what happens to him the day he arrives into Jerusalem. He gets there the previous day. He goes and sees the elders at Jerusalem, and they say, hey, listen, we need you to do something for us. And so that's going to happen over the next several days. It doesn't work. And what we have now is drama. And what we're going to have throughout the remainder of the book of Acts isn't a lot of doctrinal instruction. Paul doing a lot of teaching. There are two big speeches that he's going to have where he recounts basically the same events. His conversion, trying to persuade people to become Christians. That's it. This is a different feel, a different type of narrative that we are entering into as we're winding down our study of the book of Acts. So let's look, and I'm telling you, this is exciting stuff. This is drama. This is Netflix worthy. I just got to learn how to write a screenplay. I could be rich. Yeah, I mean, this is really fun stuff. So when the 7 days were almost completed, Paul doesn't even get to finish the vow. When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, dun, 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 what kind of an experience did Paul have with the unbelieving Jews from Asia? Yeah, they did not like Paul. Not at all. Well, after several days of this, they see Paul in the temple. Okay, big deal. They see Paul, they recognize Paul, and they end up stirring up the whole crowd. They lay their hands on Paul and they start yelling out, "Men of Israel, help!" Maybe they didn't say it quite like that. This is the man who is teaching everyone everywhere against the people and against the law and against this place, the temple. Moreover, he has even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. Is any of that true? Especially the last part. Has Paul brought Greeks into the temple? And what would be the big deal if he did? Not only were Gentiles not allowed, can you read that? They have found stones in Jerusalem, in the temple area. They had red paint, and the paint's faded away, but there are still particles of it. And this is a warning to all people. If you are not a Jew, You are not allowed into the court of the Jews. So you have the outer courtyard, big, humongous courtyard. You have the inner court, the court of the women. The women were allowed, Jewish women were allowed up to that point. Then there was the court of the Gentiles, and they were not allowed to go into the inner gate. Now, Paul's a Jew. He's not only allowed to go into the gate, he's allowed to go into the temple. No Gentiles inside the temple. No women inside the temple. And they are accusing Paul of just ignoring that. What would be the typical response of a Jew in the mid-first century? When they found out that someone brought a Gentile into the temple, what would their response be? Whatever. They're defiling the temple. And they were incensed. Now, why did they accuse Paul of bringing a Gentile, a Greek, into the temple? Because they had seen Trophimus the Ephesian, whom we have seen earlier in Acts chapter 20 and verse 4. They got a list of several names. And why did they think that Paul had taken Trophimus the Ephesian into the city? I don't know. But by the way, these men were Asians, Jews from Asia. What's the prominent city in Asia, in the Roman province of Asia? It was Ephesus. They probably recognized Trophimus as well. And so, he's a Greek. And they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Then all the city was stirred up. And the people ran together. They seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut. Boy, this has just turned serious. I mean, what are they possibly going to do to Paul here? What do you think? What could have happened? They could have torn him apart. And I wonder about the symbolism of the gates. If they're saying, we just don't want this guy Paul in here anymore, I don't know. It may just have been a unimportant detail, but probably not. Okay, so you are the tribune. You have this beautiful fortress that has been built around the temple grounds. And I got an image of the fortress of Antonia on the front page of our material today. Barracks, that's how they're often going to be referred. You have Roman soldiers filling those barracks. Why? Why are the Roman soldiers there? Yeah, Jerusalem was typically, most cities throughout the Roman Empire were run by people whom Rome would be able to trust to take care of things. They would, ideally, it would be a Jew overseeing the Jewish people. You remember, though, they had set up Roman prefects like Pontius Pilate. Jerusalem, what I'm trying to say, is volatile. Jerusalem tends to have violent issues. And so they have barracks here to keep the peace. Because what happens if Jerusalem just starts going crazy? You're not just going to have a garrison of Roman soldiers stationed there. You're going to have the full army coming your way, descending on the city. In fact, that's exactly what happens in AD 66, when the city starts fighting the garrison from the fortress of Antonia. It brings in the Roman army, and eventually Jews are massacred all throughout Jerusalem. Now that's past biblical times, but that's pretty exciting too, isn't it? The Jewish wars. The historian Josephus is the one who talks a lot. That's where we get most of our information. Let's read verses 31 through 36 and see what this fella, the tribune, we do know his name, but the tribune is what he's called right now, and he's just sitting there. He's drinking a Diet Coke. He's just having a nice day. Verse 31. And as they were seeking to kill him, Paul, word came to the tribune of the cohort of that all Jerusalem was in confusion. He, that is the tribune, at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. They were beating Paul. Then, the third time he's mentioned, the tribune came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. He inquired who he was and what he had done. Some in the crowd were shouting one thing, some another. And as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. And when he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. For the mob of the people followed, crying out, "Away with him!" What do you think? Is this fun? I mean, for us it is, not for Paul. The Roman soldiers are having to carry him out of there. Can you hear the tumult of the crowd? Everybody yelling and screaming and going crazy here. Off with his head, or at least away with him. All right, so all Jerusalem is in confusion. Isn't that something? You can just imagine all these people yelling out. Now, does that phrase, by the way, all Jerusalem was in confusion, does that ring a bell with us? It should, because that's the phrase we saw describing a different riot. Acts 19, verse 32. Now, some cried out one thing, some another, for the assembly was in confusion. That's not talking about Jerusalem. What is that talking about in Acts 19? What city was Paul in there? Ephesus. You think those Jews from Asia, i.e. Ephesus, were part of that riot? I bet they were. If they sure heard about it, if they weren't actually there. So not only was the assembly in Ephesus all in confusion, all Jerusalem was in confusion. Same exact language used. So what does the tribune do? Does the tribune say, okay, everybody quiet down, let me talk to this guy here and find out? No, he's got to get him out of there. So he arrested him, brought him to be bound. This is the point when Paul is now bound. He's arrested and he's bound. Remember that prophecy of Agabus in chapter 20? What did it say? Thus shall happen to the man who owns this belt. He will be handed over to the Gentiles and bound. It just happened. Agabus's prophecy just came true. 2 chains. How'd you like to be wrapped around with 2 chains? You're not going anywhere, are you? You think you could break chains? No, you're not going anywhere. Okay. Then he inquired, what's this guy done? Who is he? What's going on here? After arresting him and binding him. All right, let's see what happens next. Some in the crowd were shouting one thing, some another. Does that language sound familiar? We just read it. A moment ago we read this, the assembly was all in confusion, but look at how chapter 19, verse 32 starts. Some were crying out one thing, some another. Is this deliberate on Luke's part, the author of Acts? Is he making a connection between the Ephesus riot and the Jerusalem riot? You bet. This is all part of part 4 of Acts, which starts in Acts 19, verse 21. The riot is recorded in Acts 19, 23 through 41. Paul finally leaves Ephesus, wanting to make his way from Europe, from Asia to Jerusalem. And that's what the next couple of chapters are about. You see how it's all connected here? Acts 19, 23 through 41, the Ephesus riot, and now we are in the throes of the Jerusalem riot. Do you think there are other connections between the riots? There are. There most certainly are. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on to our last little section here. Paul asked to speak to the hostile crowd. Oh, man, Paul, don't make things worse. Don't make things worse. I love this little paragraph here, verses 37 through 40. You know, Paul is not the kind of guy to just sit down, roll over, right? That's not his style. So you know what Paul wants to do now? He wants to talk to them. He wants to reason with them. These folks were just trying to kill him, and now, well, let's see what happens. Let's read verses 37 through 40. So Paul's in 2 chains. He's been arrested, and Paul was about to be brought into the barracks. He said, okay, guys, okay, all right. You're dragging me along, but hold on a second. He said to the tribune, may I say something to you? I want to talk to you. All right, notice how the tribune responds. He says, do you know Greek? So what language did Paul speak here, obviously? Greek. And then this guy says, wait a minute. Aren't you that Egyptian who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the Assyrians out into the wilderness? And Paul's going, no, I'm not an Egyptian. What has the tribune just done here? What is he doing to Paul? Maybe I should ask it a little differently. I'll ask it this way. Do you think the tribune is oh, Mark, I just had the word in my head, underestimating Paul or making assumptions about him?
Up to this point, now he's asking.
Yeah. And you remember, I mean, in the tribune's defense, I mean, what was he supposed to do? He got Paul out, he saved Paul's life, and here he is assuming he's just riffraff. He is, man, the word, I had it in my head. You've heard that. No, he's misjudging him. I had a fancier word. Anyway, we just got a few minutes left, and this is really exciting stuff. All right, aren't you that Egyptian? And Paul says, no, I'm not that Egyptian. In fact, I'm a Jew, and I want to talk to these folks. So Paul replied, I am a Jew. And then Paul has this guy's attention. I am from Tarsus of Cilicia, a citizen of no small city. That's one of those little exaggeration type things where you say something that you really don't mean, and it has the opposite effect. Somebody gives you a slice of pizza, and you say, well, that's big. And you're using that same kind of effect. I mean, that's a teeny tiny slice. What am I supposed to do with that? I'll eat it in one bite. I need a piece. That's not very big, is what we should have said. Okay, so here he is saying, I am from Cilicia. I'm from Tarsus in Cilicia. That's big. That's a big deal. I'm not some backward Jew here. I actually grew up in Cilicia, I came from Cilicia, and he's later going to talk about how he grew up actually in Jerusalem. All right, so when he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the steps, motioned with his hand to the people. We've seen Paul do that before. He's trying to get their attention. And when there was a great hush, he addressed them in the Hebrew language, saying, brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you. Okay, what language did Paul say, I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia in? Greek. What language did he say, brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you? Spanish. That's right. Hebrew. Now, when we see Hebrew in the New Testament, it's actually Aramaic. And Aramaic is the spoken language by this time after the Persian Empire. Farsi shares the same letters with Hebrew, has a lot of the same syntax. They're different, but anyway, that's what they're speaking. So literally, it's actually Aramaic, but it's the native language of the Hebrew people at this time, of the Jews. So he just went from one language to talking perfectly in another language. Can anybody do that here? Is there anyone who can speak, for example, English and speak perfect Spanish? Anybody? Oh, don't be shy. You don't think you speak perfect Spanish? I wouldn't know. Okay, John Davila wants to make sure we all know. He's back there. You know what? I have a 7-year-old grandson who does that. Isn't that something? And I also can speak 2 languages, English and Pig Latin. Okay. So you got this city in an uproar, everything's crazy, and Paul's just making it crazier. So notice what it said. He addressed them in the Hebrew language, in Aramaic. He said, he finally gets their attention. He's standing before a huge crowd. Now he's high up above them. He's in this fortress area, looking down at them. They can't get him. They can't grab him. They're forced to listen to him. Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you. Oh man, Mark. I didn't finish the PowerPoint. Okay, all right, hold on. We're almost done here. He addressed them in the Hebrew language, saying. That's the end of chapter 21. Yay, we made it. Then there is the next verse that I have on the screen for you. You should thank me for that, because I would have left you hanging with just saying. Boy, isn't that an awkward chapter division. Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you, and now I remember what I did. Listen to verse 2, and that's where we're going to quit. When they had heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, they became even more quiet. I mean, before you heard people going, okay, all right, this guy who we were just trying to kill, he wants to talk to us, and we're being forced to listen. Okay, we'll listen to him. And then he addresses them. Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you. And they realize he's talking in our language. He's one of us. What has Paul just done? Well, he's provided a cliffhanger for us. But, I mean, he goes on to talk, and that's what we're going to look at next week. So here it is, the title slide for next week. That's Paul now. See him? He's standing before the crowd, and they're all looking at him, and he's going to talk to these guys. Will it end well? If you take a look at chapter 22, you'll see in verse 29, I'm sorry, it's actually verse 21. Verse 22, they're going to listen to him, and then they're going to say, away with such a fellow. It's not going to end well, but that's what we're going to look at next week. Is this fun? It's going to be really exciting. What I encourage you to do is not listen to my dumb commentary where I'm trying to explain it. Just read it for yourself. Just read Paul coming into Jerusalem, Acts 22, verse 17. Read through the rest of the book and get caught up in the drama. This is the most fun part of Acts, and I want us to enjoy it as Luke intended it to be. An exciting, fun-filled, providentially guided drama. All right. Thank you for going through that with me.